and night, but most of that wet weather should be moving away as well.
Morning. Come and have a seat. Now, of course, I'm not going to go easy on you. There are some really big questions we've got to try and get answers to this morning. But I'll be fair, and we just want to hear what you've got to say. So, shall we get on with it?
We're rolling.
Here we go. Join me to hear from the biggest names inside and outside politics.
Sunday with Laura Koonsberg. Sundays at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
You experienced racism. Why didn't you walk away?
That's a really good question.
You're a politician. You read the polls.
I'm not a politician. I don't read the polls.
Yeah, you
I
are
sit
a
in Judiciary
politician.
Committee. No,
You are
I do
very
not.
definitely a politician.
No.
The very fact that there were not people who looked like you.
Hold on. I'm only halfway through my answer.
Is secret schooling happening across Afghanistan for girls?
It does.
You simply can't assume that.
Actually, yes, you can.
Hard Talk. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
The betting firm William Hill is fined £19 million for failing to protect customers. The record fine comes after the regulator found what it called alarming problems, including new customers betting large sums without proper checks.
The UK has the largest online gambling industry in the world. Other regulators, other countries watch what we do. So it's important that we bring attention to these sorts of issues and make sure that we get the level of compliance that we need to see.
Also on the programme this lunchtime. The terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has just been raised to severe, which means an attack is very likely. The elementary school shooting in Nashville that killed 6 people. Police say they've recovered weapons and detailed plans from the home of the attacker. Improving London's Victorian plumbing. We have rare access to the new super sewer, engineered to cope with modern demands.
The idea behind it is, well, that it will collect the sewage and stormwater that at the moment goes into the river and take it downhill to East London, where it can be processed properly.
And a unique musical production written and performed by a cast who've experienced homelessness.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Anthony Joshua says a future fight with Tyson Fury is what boxing needs. The former 2-time world champion says meeting the WBC belt holder is his priority.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The betting company William Hill has been ordered to pay more than £19 million for failing to protect its customers, the largest penalty ever imposed by the regulator. The Gambling Commission said it found problems that were so widespread and alarming that it had considered suspending William Hill's licence. In one case, a customer was able to open a new account and spend £23,000 in just 20 minutes without any checks. Our business correspondent Theo Leggett has this report.
Gamble responsibly with William Hill.
William Hill likes to say it promotes responsible gambling. But today, the regulator, the Gambling Commission, has found otherwise. It's accused the company of widespread and alarming failures, which put vulnerable customers at risk.
Gambling itself has never been easier. You can bet on sports or play poker, for example, at the click of a mouse or using an app on your phone. But there are meant to be checks and balances in place to protect those who might be at risk of gambling-related harm and to prevent the industry from being exploited by criminals. And it's these kinds of checks that William Hill is being accused of not carrying out.
One new customer, the Commission says, opened an account and spent £23,000 in just 20 minutes, without any intervention from the company. Another lost more than £45,000 before William Hill gave them a call. And some customers placed very large deposits, but no inquiries were made about where exactly the money came from. The regulator says it's prepared to take tough action over failures like these.
What we've seen in this review is completely unacceptable. William Hill accept that. William Hill accept that they needed to improve things, and they've done so. But we won't hesitate, if we need to take firm action, to do so again. And we have in the last year, since the beginning of last year, suspended 4 licences of operators. We've taken considerable action and will continue to do so.
William Hill Group was recently bought by 888 Holdings. It said, "The settlement relates to the period when William Hill was under the previous ownership and management. After William Hill was acquired, the company quickly addressed the identified issues with the implementation of a rigorous action plan." The £19.2 million penalty is the largest the Gambling Commission has ever imposed, but critics say it's nowhere near enough.
So 90% of the gambling industry's profits, when you take away the National Lottery, come from 5% of customers who are either addicted or at risk of addiction. So paying a fine of £19.2 million, which will sound like a lot of money to you or I, actually isn't very much money in comparison to William Hill's turnover. And it's much cheaper for them to simply pay the fine and then keep doing business as usual.
The government is due to publish a long-delayed review of gambling laws within weeks. It's expected to call for major reforms, including more thorough checks on what gamblers can afford and tighter controls on advertising. But such measures are expected to be controversial and generate plenty of noise from the industry and its critics.
Theo is with me, and so changes to gambling regulations have been talked about for a while. So why are some of the examples we heard about there still happening?
Well, for a start, there hasn't actually been a big change in gambling law since 2005. And during that period, we've seen a big expansion of the industry, and the industry's changed. People gamble on their mobile phones now in a way that they really didn't back then. And the law kind of hasn't kept up. But also, there's the fact that there are guidelines in place. And according to the Gambling Commission, not just William Hill, but other gambling firms have not been adhering to them, which is why over the past 15 months, it's come out with a number of fines. It isn't just William Hill. That's the record fine, but others have been penalised as well. So the question now is what comes up in this government review, which was originally due to come out a long time ago when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. It's been repeatedly delayed, and that has caused some anger because of the political turmoil we saw in Westminster last year, and before that the COVID pandemic. So we are expecting that to come out potentially within weeks, and that is likely to have some reforms to, for example, affordability checks, setting a framework where gambling companies will be able to check whether people can actually afford the kind of stakes they're playing for, reducing some of the stakes that you can gamble with online, tightening up rules on gambling advertising, for example. So there is this new framework coming up. We just haven't seen it yet.
All right. Thank you, Theo Leggett. In the last few minutes, the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has been raised from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. The move follows a rise in dissident Republican activity, including a gun attack last month on a senior police officer. Let's get the latest from Emma Vardy, who is in Belfast. So why is this being done, Emma?
Well, the main security threat in Northern Ireland, as you say, is posed by violent dissident Republicans. Now, these are armed paramilitary groups who still exist and who take part in political violence, who want to try and force Northern Ireland to leave the UK. Now, in fact, the terror threat level in Northern Ireland was in fact reduced last year for the first time in 12 years, but it is now being raised again today to severe, meaning that an attack is highly likely. Now, there has been, MI5 have taken this decision because of an increase in activity by violent dissident Republicans. There are threats often of those that we don't hear about, but there was a very notable incident last month when a senior police officer, Detective John Caldwell, was shot multiple times by dissident Republicans, and that incident was linked to the new IRA. So that threat level is being raised by MI5 today. But that said, it is still true that these organisations are very much smaller than they once were, have been very much weakened by security services, by infiltration by MI5 in recent years. But this is still a recognition of the danger that they pose.
All right, Emma Vardy, thank you. Police in the US investigating yesterday's mass shooting at a school in Nashville say it was a carefully planned attack. 6 people were killed, including 3 children, when a former pupil broke into the school and opened fire. The attacker was 28-year-old Audrey Hale, who was shot dead at the scene. Police described her as a biological woman who'd been using male pronouns. Nomia Iqbal's report contains images of the attacker inside the school.
Outside this religious school, people quietly reflect. It's a familiar grief, but one that no one gets used to.
Since we survived a mass shooting in July, I have met with over 130 lawmakers. How is this still happening? How are our children still dying, and why are we failing them?
Children from nursery age up to 12 years old attend here. And like most schools in America, they actually practice how to deal with an active shooting. Police say this was a carefully planned attack by the perpetrator, Audrey Hale.
We've also determined there were maps drawn of the school in detail of surveillance, entry points, etc. We know and believe that entry was gained through shooting through one of the doors.
Video footage shows the 28-year-old driving to the school, shooting the glass to get in, and then stalking the halls with a gun. Within 14 minutes of someone calling for help, Hale was shot dead by police. By that point, 3 students aged 9 and under were dead, as well as 3 adults, including the head of the school. Hale was a former student, but the motivation is unknown. After 19 children were killed in a school shooting in Uvalde, Texas last year, President Biden passed major gun safety legislation, which got bipartisan support, but he says this shooting is a reminder the law doesn't go far enough.
We have to do more to stop gun violence. It's ripping our communities apart, ripping the soul of this nation, ripping at the very soul of the nation.
Police are examining a manifesto left by the assailant. But yet, once again, American families are learning that sending their children to school doesn't necessarily mean they're sending them to safety.
Police here are trying to piece together exactly what they know about Audrey Hale, a former student at the school here. In the immediate aftermath, there was some confusion about the attacker's identity. Initially, we were told the attacker was a woman and then transgender, but now police are saying, and I'll give you the exact quote, Hale was a biological woman who on a social media profile used male pronouns. And of course, when these shootings happen, there is a focus on gun politics. President Biden last year passed major gun safety legislation with bipartisan support, but what he really wants to do is ban assault rifles, the type of weapons used in this shooting, used in most mass shootings. But it's going to be pretty impossible for that to happen because he needs Republican support. And his opponents say any further laws will infringe on American people's constitutional right to own guns.
Nomia Iqbal in Nashville. Thank you. The new leader of the SNP, Humza Yousaf, is likely to be confirmed as Scotland's First Minister this afternoon in a vote by members of the Scottish Parliament. He'll then be officially sworn in tomorrow, succeeding Nicola Sturgeon, making him the youngest person to hold the post and the first from a minority ethnic background. Humza Yousaf has pledged to unite the SNP and to achieve independence. Our Scotland correspondent James Shaw reports.
I therefore declare Humza Yousaf duly elected as the Scottish National Party leader.
Humza Yousaf's moment of triumph, becoming the new leader of the SNP and the first from an ethnic minority.
My immediate priority will be to continue to protect every Scot as far as we possibly can from the harm inflicted by the cost of living crisis, to recover and reform our NHS and other vital public services.
Mr Yousaf's success is a moment to savour for Scotland's Asian communities, although not everyone here on the south side of Glasgow is a supporter, and many shops and businesses are quiet because it's Ramadan, the month of fasting.
I think we feel that he will do a good job. We have kind of basically backed him in the past, and I feel that, you know, he will do a good job.
But the focus today is on Edinburgh. What happens this afternoon in this building, the Scottish Parliament, is important. It is expected that Humza Yousaf will be voted in as the next First Minister of Scotland. And then tomorrow, just a short distance up the Royal Mile at the Court of Session, he will be formally sworn in. On Thursday, the first big test. He will be interrogated by the leaders of the opposition parties at First Minister's questions. And Mr Yousaf's entree is already bursting with problems that need to be urgently addressed, not least reuniting his divided party. He may not get a lot of time to repair the fractures caused by a hard-fought leadership contest.
If by the end of the summer support for independence isn't back up, and if in particular Labour are still breathing down the SNP's neck so far as the next UK general election is concerned, then perhaps a degree of nervousness will set in.
The SNP's opponents will see this as an opportunity to try to end its dominance of politics in Scotland. Supporters of the party will be hoping it's the start of a new, more hopeful era. And while all that has been going on, way over on the other side of town here in Edinburgh at Bute House, the official residence of the First Minister, we've seen the very last moments, the last seconds of Nicola Sturgeon's time in that office, writing her letter to the monarch, to King Charles III, formally tendering her resignation. It has been accepted, and those pictures suggest that Nicola Sturgeon is someone who feels a weight lifting off her shoulders, while those responsibilities are being placed on someone else's shoulders, and a new tenant will arrive very soon at Bute House.
Thanks, James. James Shaw. Housing campaigners say the police often don't understand the law when it comes to protecting tenants from harassment or illegal eviction. The charity shelter says there's a big disparity between the number of cases being reported and the number of people convicted. The National Police Chiefs Council says most private tenancy disputes are civil in nature, but that police should be contacted if there are criminal actions. Jim Connolly has more.
Amit, not his real name, was renting a room in a 5-bedroom house, and his landlord tried to illegally evict him. When he refused to leave, things took a violent turn for the worse. Captured on CCTV. Amit told us the attack by people acting for his landlord was part of a sustained period of harassment.
I was so scared. I couldn't go out of the room. I always stayed inside the room. I go to the toilet only at night, in the middle of the night. During the daytime, I used a bottle to urinate. Because somebody's there outside. I was so scared, so they're going to attack me again. Anything can happen to me at that time.
The two people were given a police caution. His landlord didn't respond to our request for a comment. It's worth noting these attacks are not the norm. That said, over a 4-year period, Citizens Advice received around 16,000 calls relating to harassment and illegal eviction. There's concern that there's a big gap between that figure and the 101 convictions over the same period. Researchers say many don't come forward because they're worried about the consequences of doing so.
We've seen this a lot in our research. People just too frightened to speak out for fear of the consequences. One case stands out. A man so badly beaten that he ended up in hospital. But he was too frightened to tell us his story because he was worried his landlord would come after him.
The housing charity Shelter says not enough people are being held accountable.
I think in the case of the police, they often don't know what to do. They may not even know what's illegal and what isn't. I think they feel sometimes that incidents that happen in people's own homes are kind of private.
Daniela's waiting to move out of the room she lives in with her 5 children. She says her family have been constantly harassed by the person she rents from.
And also here is put all the clothes inside in the toilet.
So you put your clothes?
Inside, yeah, in. Please close the gas, close the water, speaking very, very bad with children.
The person she rented from didn't respond to our request for a comment. The ultimate owner of the property says it's been sublet without his knowledge. We asked the National Police Chiefs Council whether the police use powers available to them to protect tenants enough. It told us the vast majority of private tenancy disputes are civil in nature. Where actions are clearly criminal, the police should be contacted. For Daniela, she just hopes her new home will be more peaceful for her family.
I hope It's better for me because here is very, very bad.
Jim Connolly, BBC News.
The time is 18 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The betting firm William Hill is fined £19 million for failing to protect customers after the regulator found what it called alarming problems. Still to come here.
I'm at Wellington Barracks in London with some of the soldiers and their horses that are going to be taking part in the coronation. And to celebrate, they've been brought together for a big lunch this afternoon.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, England captain Leah Williamson has come top of this year's BBC Women's Hour Power List, which recognises 30 women in the UK who have made a significant impact in the sporting world.
More than 150 feet below London, engineers have been building what they hope will be the solution to the capital's sewage problems. The system dates back to Victorian times and struggles to cope when there's heavy rainfall, often leading to untreated waste being pumped into the River Thames. Our environment correspondent Jonah Fisher has been given rare access to the super sewer to find out how it's going to help.
Just looking for history, looking for stories really.
Lara is a mudlark, forever searching the brown banks of the River Thames.
I found a complete Iron Age pot, a Tudor shoe.
But alongside the treasures are more familiar items that have been flushed away.
Condoms, Tampax, applicators, sanitary towels, wet wipes. You name it, I found it.
This is London, but it's a story repeated across the United Kingdom. An ageing sewage network regularly spilling its pungent load.
We're spoiling it, we're pouring our waste into it and just destroying it.
But deep beneath the river, the clean-up plan is nearly ready to flow. A £5 billion tunnel, the largest and deepest the capital has ever seen.
The reason we're riding on bikes through this tunnel is because it's just so big. It's 15 miles long, all the way across London under the River Thames. And the idea behind it is, well, that it will collect the sewage and stormwater that at the moment goes into the river and take it downhill to East London, where it can be processed properly.
Here we are at the Victoria interception point.
We're shown one of the 34 sewage overflow pipes that are being diverted to join the tunnel rather than flowing into the Thames.
This will clean up the river quite significantly.
Absolutely.
The tunnel can hold enough sewage to fill 600 Olympic-sized swimming pools. But in the future, that still might not be enough, with climate change expected to bring more heavy rain.
The point here is that the solution for London going forward is to do something better with the rainwater than simply throw it in the sewers in the first place. And that is what's going to make the difference going forward.
Not far upstream, what we throw down the loo is actually changing the course of the river.
So this is what we refer to as a wet wipe reef.
A mass of wet wipes and sanitary products now jut out into the river at several points.
All these, what look like leaves, are wipes. The best case scenario for us is that the tunnel reduces or even stops new material coming to a reef like this, and over time, when we start clearing the material, the reef will shrink.
It's nice to have something positive to say about the river, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
After years of abuse, just maybe the tide has turned. Jonah Fisher, BBC News, on the banks of the River Thames.
Firefighters in eastern Spain have been battling the country's first major wildfire of the year, which has destroyed more than 10,000 acres of forest in the Valencia region. More than 1,000 people have been moved out of their homes. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said the blaze was yet another example of how the climate emergency was affecting his country. France is facing another day of nationwide protests as opposition continues to President Macron's pension reforms. More than 1 million people took part in protests last week, leading to some violent clashes. France has been in turmoil since the president announced a number of new laws, including raising the state retirement age from 62 to 64. Well, let's go to Paris and join our correspondent, Hugh Schofield. Hugh, it seems that the protests show no sign of dampening down, calming down at all.
Not really, not really. If you look behind me, we've got another monster demonstration going through the middle of Paris from the Place de la République to Place de la Nation. That way, it kicked off about half an hour ago with about 200 riot police ahead of the cortege, and now we've got the same usual noisy, very good-humoured demonstration filing past, and will continue to do so for, imagine, another couple of hours. But it's not the demonstrations proper which are the issue here. The fear is of the violence which tends to follow now after them. And last Thursday, if you remember, we had that similar demonstration, started off fine, but which broke down at the end at the Opera here into running street battles between protesters and these radical black blocs, as they call here, people from the far left who seek confrontation with police. Over the weekend, there was another very violent demonstration in the west of the country over a totally different issue, water rights, which again ended up in serious violence with people hospitalized and so on. And the fear is today that we're going to see a repeat of that later on after this demonstration comes to a close.
All right, Hugh, thank you. Hugh Schofield there in Paris. Now, the royal household is hoping that the King's coronation in May will be an opportunity for communities to come together and celebrate. Today sees the launch of the Big Lunch, which will take place on the Sunday of the coronation weekend, the 7th of May. Our correspondent Charlotte Gallagher is at Wellington Barracks in central London and can tell us more. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, these are just some of the soldiers and their horses, of course, that are going to be working during the coronation weekend. And of course, they're going to be part of history. They're going to be witnessing history, but they're not going to have much chance to celebrate, are they, during that really busy period? So they've been brought here today for a big lunch. And also here, Mel Gedroich, the presenter. You've not joined the household division, have you? But you're here in a different role.
I'm dressed as if I have, Charlotte. I'm doing Coldstream with a twist. Thank you. Red, black and gold.
You look fabulous.
Hold my hand, they're cold.
Yeah, it's very cold. This was meant to be outside in the sun. We've kind of had to move it inside because it's cold and raining. So Mel's here as emotional support for the weather as well. But you're here really to launch the big lunch, aren't you?
Absolutely. And as you said, these guys are going to be super busy doing all the amazing ceremonial stuff that they do for the coronation. So we're having a big lunch today instead. Have you seen the horses? Warrior and Hastings. Part of the lunch, they've got carrots. The guys have eaten Guys, have you eaten everything? They've eaten pretty much everything. Salmon, bagels, everything.
I think you could have been quite good in the army, you know, issuing those orders.
I've become really bossy since being at Wellington Barracks. I do apologise, guys.
They've
See,
all got
they're
quiet
now. Very quiet, slightly scared.
And what are you going to be doing for the coronation?
So I will be having a big lunch myself. Sadly, not here in the heart of London. I'll be in Liverpool, which will be amazing, prior to Eurovision. So I shall be sharing a Scotch egg with Rylan and Scott Mills, I should imagine.
And people probably would pay good money for that. And you obviously used to host the Bake Off. Do people now presume that this kind of thing, you're going to be bringing the cakes and you know exactly what you're doing?
Yes, I mean, people, I've already said about this scone, it's literally in the blood. I said that's got too much baking powder in it. You can take a girl out of Bake Off, Charlotte, but you can't take Bake Off out.
Mary would not be impressed.
No.
She wouldn't. The angle on that scone.
The angle was bad, but it still was delicious. And these guys are going to do an amazing job on that weekend. And I hope that people will be having big lunches all over the country. That's the whole point of them. They can be big, they can be small. Have a sausage roll with your neighbour, do an intricate trestle table, whatever it is you're going to do. But I hope everyone will be celebrating.
And that's really the point of this big lunch. It's to get communities together for the coronation, to enjoy themselves, meet their neighbours, have chats. And I think, should we go for lunch now? Yeah.
Let's do it.
Thank you very much, Charlotte Gallagher. Yeah, but make sure the scones are right, apparently. That's what we take away from all of that. Charlotte Gallagher at Wellington Barracks. Now, a unique opera production written and performed by a cast who've all experienced homelessness has been described as a lifesaver. The project's aim was to inspire and empower the people taking part, to help them gain confidence and rebuild their lives. Our Midlands correspondent, Navtesh Johal, has the story.
Just about to go on. Any nerves?
No, I'm very confident, yeah. We're going to show them the best of what we can do.
Simon is about to walk on stage at one of the most prestigious concert halls in London. He will perform in front of hundreds of people who have bought a ticket to see him and dozens of others who all once felt invisible and ignored. The 58-year-old from Nottingham reached this point from a tough start.
Can you show me where you used to sleep rough?
Yeah, I used to come down this way.
When he was 16, Simon became homeless after problems with his family.
Sometimes I'd sleep in the toilet at night because it was warm. I felt so insecure. Times I'd feel like committing suicide.
Simon continued to have struggles into his adult life, but StreetWise Opera helped him turn things around. It's an opera company that works with people who've experienced homelessness.
It's changed my life completely from head to toe from within. I have friends which I've never had. I have joy, peace, love.
Their latest project is a show with 9 micro-operas, all written and performed by people who have been homeless from across Manchester, Nottingham and London, culminating in a big performance at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London, accompanied by the BBC Concert Orchestra and the 16 Choir. All of the performers share the experience of being homeless.
A lot of our performers talk about how when they've experienced homelessness, they feel unseen, they feel ignored. And this is an opportunity for their voices to be heard.
So this is it. They began working on this project a year ago and it all comes together now. The performers are walking on stage, the BBC Concert Orchestra and hundreds of audience members await them.
Everyone involved, that was absolutely magnificent.
How was that? Absolutely fantastic. You know, it just feels like I'm a real star.
A standing ovation and a night that they'll never forget.
An extraordinary well done.
Navtej Johal, BBC News.
And if you'd like to hear that concert in full, it'll be on BBC Radio 3 tomorrow at 7:30 tomorrow evening. That takes us now to a look at the weather. Hello to Darren Betts.
Hello there, Jane. Good afternoon. We've got more rain around today. May not amount to very much, but in Cambridge, we've had more rain this month than fell during the whole of winter. And it's quite cold rain today that's falling across many parts of the country. That colder air, though, is going to be replaced by tomorrow with much milder air that's coming in from the Atlantic. But if we look at the satellite picture, there's still a lot of cloud in the Atlantic. So with that milder air, there's going to be yet more rain. And this is the cloud that's bringing today's rain. That rain continuing to push slowly northwards and eastwards over the next few hours. Across Northern Ireland, it should be cheering up with some sunshine and sharp showers. Signs of that milder air coming in here, but still quite chilly with that wetter weather across eastern parts of Scotland and eastern England. We should see that wetter weather from today pushing away out into the North Sea this evening, and for a while overnight it's going to turn dry. There'll be a lot of cloud around. We'll see some rain arriving in the far southwest later and also in western Scotland, but a mild night tonight. Lowest temperatures are going to be across Aberdeenshire around 3 or 4 degrees. But tomorrow sees a lot of cloud, limited amount of sunshine, and there's going to be some rain from time to time. Perhaps not quite as extensive as today, but through the afternoon the second rain band turns a bit heavier in Scotland and it gets wet later in the day across Wales and the southwest of England. But whilst it's a breezier day, it's a milder day. Temperatures widely getting up to 15, perhaps even 16 degrees. We've got these weather fronts bringing some more rain in from the Atlantic. Those will move away, and before this low pressure brings more rain overnight into the course of Friday, we've got more of a showery sort of picture on Thursday. Sunshine and showers. Those will develop more widely, particularly focused on England and Wales. There could be some hail and thunder, a few showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland where it's not quite so windy. This could be the warmest day of the week ahead. Temperatures in eastern England 16, possibly even 17 degrees. And then we've got that next area of low pressure bringing some windy weather. Looks like the windiest weather will be across northern France with some impacts more likely there. Mind mind you, the rain will have an impact across the UK. More rain, particularly wet on Friday across southern parts of England and Wales, but there will be some wetter weather arriving in Northern Ireland, a few showers further north, but perhaps also some sunshine around as well. Temperatures will be a little bit lower on Friday, typically 11 to 13 degrees. And as we head into the weekend, those temperatures will continue to drop just a little bit further. But at the same time, most of the wet weather should be moving away. Jane.
All right, Darren, thank you very much. Thank you. And that is it from the news at 1 for today. On BBC One, we will join our newsrooms now, wherever you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
And it's time for some sport here on